thank you everybody for joining our latest webinar on lithium-ion battery safety with colleagues from Electrical Safety First. It's Henry and Giuseppe. We're going to be running through a presentation for 20 minutes or so, and there'll be lots of space for discussion around some of the key issues for us in the social housing sector, how we get to grips with this emerging risk of lithium-ion batteries, especially where they occur in mobility scooters, e-bikes and other devices. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Henry. Henry, please take it away.
Hi guys, thanks for taking the time to listen to us talk today about a really important issue. So I'll get some slides up and there'll be some introductions in there. Yeah, I'll let Giuseppe take it away with his introduction.
Okay, so good morning everyone. My name's Giuseppe Capana and I'm a product safety engineer with Electrical Safety First. So we're all about trying to get the messages out there to people to try and keep themselves safe with regards to lithium-ion batteries, e-bikes, e-scooters, and actually all types of electrical products.
Thanks, Giuseppe, and I'm Henry. I work in the Policy and Public Affairs teams and the Westminster Public Affairs Advisor, so oftentimes piggyback off Giuseppe's sort of hard work and go and try and lobby government to make legislation and regulations to try and help keep people safe. I've put our emails on here as well in case anyone's got any follow-up questions later on that they'd like to get in touch with us for. So I think one of the best things to do would be to start the conversation by framing it and sort of showing the real sort of cost of human life that can actually unfortunately come from sort of incidents with e-bikes and e-scooter fires. And this is Scott. You may have seen last week, Scott was the media on Good Morning Britain, on the breakfast shows with Giuseppe as well alongside him, on some shows to try and talk about a story where he unfortunately lost a couple of members of his family as well.
It was about to be one of the best times of our life. Our little son Oliver was about to finish play school. He was about to go into full-time school. That meant Gemma could finally get a job and we could start actually having a decent life, because ever since Lily was born, Gemma had become a full-time mum and all our lives were literally about to start, and it just all got snuffed out in a night. Well, I've been working at M&S for coming up to 11 years, and I've been riding to work, doing it in the wind, the rain, the traffic, any sort of condition you could think of. I just thought, our lives are about to get easier now. It's literally just supposed to be a luxury item just to make all our lives easier. If I'd known that it could cause this, I never would have bought it. We were woken in the night by an almighty bang. The floor shaked, the house echoed. By the time I got outside my bedroom, I could see the glow of the fire. There was flames coming up the stairs like a flamethrower. I've never seen anything like it. I was terrified for my children. I knew something had to be done, so I jumped out the window. I told Gemma I'll be back in a minute. I basically got into the back door and the entire hallway was engulfed in flames, and I could just see this massive glow just right above my bike. Everything was on fire. So I ran back out to the back garden and started calling for Gemma and the kids to jump. The last thing I ever heard from my girlfriend was, "We can't get out, we're stuck." I called for her about 2 more times, but I never got an answer from her again. At that point, I collapsed on the floor in tears. I closed my eyes after that, and I woke up 4 weeks later in hospital. I'd been in a coma for 4 weeks. And no one had made it out of the house. And now I've got to live with this fact that, do they know that I helped? Or was the last memory of me, where the hell is Dad? My son was found in his bedroom. My girlfriend was found in the doorway of my bedroom. And my daughter was found under the bed with my dogs. But I can guarantee you that in the next couple of years, everyone will know someone who's had an accident with an e-bike and turned in a fire. And we are trusting the government that they are safe, but they are not. They need to be regulated, they need to be checked. Change the rules to save someone's life. My life has been ruined, but I can save someone else's.
Thanks. I think that, the incredible bravery there from Scott to share his story. I think that really sort of sets the tone and just sort of shows really the actual human impact, which I know we can definitely sometimes lose sight of when we're talking about these kind of things. So sort of with that, I'll let Giuseppe take it away with some of the technical aspects and the risk.
Okay, so last year we put together a report looking at the issues with lithium-ion batteries, e-bikes and e-scooters. And this report was a bit different to what you usually see, in that usually you often see reports pointing out the problems that you get with different things that happen over time. But what we wanted to concentrate on is not just saying how bad these things were, because we all know that e-bikes and e-scooters actually, can also be a good thing. They're really good for our economy and for getting people out of their cars and for reaching our net zero targets that we're all working for. So, trying to tackle the issue is what we need to do. So we decided to put together this report, and this report includes the big thing, which is solutions to the problem. Okay, next slide, Henry. Okay, so as I said, the rise of e-micromobility, we see them everywhere, these e-bikes and e-scooters. The market's worth over £300 million for e-bikes. And just to show how big this will become, if you look at e-scooters, there's an enormous number of e-scooters out there, even though they're actually completely illegal to use on anywhere apart from private land. That excludes the hire schemes that you see in London. But if you ever see someone riding around on a public road on one of these e-scooters, they're doing it illegally. And if you imagine how big the market is now, you just need to imagine how big the market will become when these e-scooters become legalized. And I'm pretty confident that that will happen at some time in the future. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the big issue with lithium-ion batteries is thermal runaway. So what you have in a lithium-ion battery is it's a double-edged sword. You've got an enormous amount of energy packed into a really tight space. And that is great because it means we can go further, we can go faster. It's actually a good thing. But it's also the disadvantage of lithium-ion batteries. When you have that amount of energy in a small space, when something goes wrong, it can be really devastating. So, when there's a fault on one of these lithium-ion batteries, the fire from it, as you've seen in Scott's video there, and in some testing that we actually carried out firsthand, the fires are so fierce. The fire that came out of the lithium-ion battery that we tested at the test house in North London, within seconds it had burned through a solid aluminium case. And as you know, aluminium, you're looking at about 800 odd degrees centigrade in order to melt aluminium, and this was bursting through this like a flamethrower. Okay, next slide. Oh, just one last thing there. Just go back slightly, Henry. There's one other important thing about lithium-ion batteries, is that once the chemical reaction starts, it can't stop. Unplugging it won't make any difference. And trying to put the fire out also won't work, because if you look at the way fire extinguishers work and fire blankets work, they work by smothering the fire and removing the oxygen and putting the fire out by removing the oxygen. Well, when a lithium-ion battery goes into thermal runaway, the chemical reaction that happens creates its own oxygen, and therefore trying to remove external oxygen from the fire has no effect. So it's quite important that if you see this type of thing happening, you just need to get out of the building as quickly as you can and call the fire services. Do not try and tackle one of these fires. Okay, next slide. So causes of thermal runaway. So it can be caused by overcharging the battery, over discharging the battery, incompatibilities between the battery and the charger. Short circuits may be caused by, I don't know, water getting into the battery, that type of thing. But what I will say here is it sounds like, wow, these things are so dangerous. Why are they in anything? But the thing to remember here is that this actually technology has been around for years and years and years. And it's in our laptops. We're probably all sitting right next to a lithium ion battery at the moment, right in front of you in your laptop or computer or your mobile phone. And we don't see these products just bursting into flames on a regular basis. So the problem is, as I see and as we have seen, is substandard products. So it can happen by poor manufacturing. It can happen mechanically. So, for example, hitting a curb, the battery being penetrated by an object. If the battery is subjected to extreme high and low temperatures, for example, if you put it right next to a heater, but I mean right next to a heater, the batteries are actually quite robust. The first day of testing, we spent the whole day trying to get one of these lithium ion batteries to go into thermal runaway at the test house. We couldn't manage it. Whatever we tried to do, the battery management system would cut in and it would make the product safe. So, they're not quite as bad as it looks on some of these things, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is actually a bit of footage from the testing that we carried out at the test house. This is the battery I was talking about. So this battery is an aluminium case and it has been overcharged for about 3-4 hours. So it's a 36 volt battery being charged by a 54 volt charger. And that's my clamp meter being cooked in the corner there. So you can see they're glowing red hot. I think we measured the temperature in there getting up to sort of between 800 and 1200 degrees centigrade. And as we said earlier, you have to wait for the fire to go out. This is a slow motion version of the same thing. So you can actually see there where the actual heat is actually burning through the aluminium case. And then where it's pierced through the aluminium case, that's where you get the jets from the fire. And it's so fierce, it's actually moving the battery about. You can see it's going backwards and forwards. And I think we actually saw these cells also being ejected from the battery, some of them being thrown sort of like 10, 20 feet. Okay, so things that we've seen. So last year, 11 people died as a result of an e-bike or e-scooter battery. And the London Fire Brigade, who have like the best data, I must say, of all the fire services in the country, their data showing that 40% of all the e-bike and fires that they've been going to were caused by conversion kits. So that is a standard bike that has been converted into an e-bike using a kit that's maybe bought online. We found in one day during the investigation last year 60 chargers that didn't meet any safety standards. So these chargers, they actually come with a whole selection of different connectors. So they're designed to be connected to any battery. So we said there we were charging a 36 volt battery with a 54 volt charger. Well, we'd seen chargers up to 96 volts, and they come with connectors that allow them to be connected to any battery in order for sellers to try and sell these chargers to as many people as possible. None of these chargers had ever been anywhere near a test house, despite the fact that they were all CE marked, because they were fitted with, if you go on to the next slide, you'll actually, I think we've got a picture of a plug. Yeah, okay. So here's a picture of one of the chargers. So this is what we call a clover leaf plug. If you see any product with this type of plug fitted, it doesn't meet safety standards. It can't get through testing with this type of plug. Apart from the fact that the plug doesn't meet the plug standard, it has no fuse, so there's a fire risk from the lead. There's an electric shock risk because it's the wrong dimensions. Most of the time, every time I've tested one of these plug pins, the plug pins don't have any copper in them. It's nearly 100% zinc, and the plug pins just break off, so they can break off in the socket outlet. But the thing is, they're just the bits we can see. What we know is when we see a product with one of these plugs, it hasn't been through any of the safety testing that's required by law. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so some of the solutions. So the most important thing is, as we were saying, so the problems we're seeing are from substandard products and products being modified by consumers. We've seen lots and lots of YouTube videos out there telling people, oh, you can get your e-bike to go faster, to go longer by making these modifications. And usually the modifications to the safety features within the battery. So each battery has what's called a battery management system. And if it's a reputable battery, that battery management system is quite robust. It protects against over voltage, under voltage. It protects against the battery getting too hot. Any of these things happen, even overcharging. So if you've got a proper battery management system and you charge it with the wrong charger, it will shut it down. The problem happens when you get a mixture of someone modifying the battery management system to circumvent the safety features, and then someone comes along with the wrong charger and charges it, and that's when a fire happens. So first thing that's most important is make sure you buy your e-bike, e-scooter or battery from a reputable retailer. Always use the charger that comes with the e-bike or e-scooter. If you need to replace it, go back to the original manufacturer. Avoid third-party sellers on online marketplaces, because you can't guarantee that those products have been through the proper safety testing. If you're charging your battery, when it's finished charging, unplug it. Don't leave it on charge continuously. If you can, charge it when you're there. We know sometimes you need to charge these things overnight, like if you need the e-bike or e-scooter for the morning. If that's the case, make sure you've got working smoke alarms. I'll also say here, if you can charge it, never charge it in an exit route that's going to stop you getting out of the building. Now, if you can charge it outside of the building, now not everyone can, we understand that, which is why we do a lot of this stuff. But if you do have, the opportunity to be able to charge it away from the building, that's probably also a good thing. Okay, next slide, Henry. Okay, so some of the things that we're calling for. So what we've said is we've seen on these online marketplaces lots of these e-bikes and e-scooters. They are CE marked. So that's the manufacturer's declaration that they've met all the safety testing. The reality is they haven't. So what we're seeing is products that manufacturers are saying, yeah, we've done all the proper testing, this is a safe product, and when we've looked into it, it isn't the case. So what we're calling for is something that's actually come out in New York already, which is mandatory third-party certification and approval for these products before they're put on sale and before people buy them and bring them into our homes. We're also calling for standards for conversion kits. You often see conversion kits for sale on online marketplaces. They're not complete. They just have the motor, the controller, and the hub, and then it's down to the consumer to have to work out which battery and which charger they need for the conversion kit, and that's one of the things that's causing these problems to happen. We also want to see either a non-proprietary charging system, which is similar to what you have for your mobile phone, like the USB system. It won't be USB, but a system where the charger will talk to the battery before charging starts so they can establish a protocol, or a system where you can't plug in the wrong type of charger to the wrong type of battery. So that's where the plug and socket system is dedicated to that particular battery or charger. Okay, next slide. Couple of the other things. So we also have seen that, like we said, there's batteries up to 96 volts. That's electric shock risk just from the battery itself. So having a limit of 60 volts DC on all the electric circuits within a battery will remove that electric shock risk. And then we just have the other issues to deal with. We talked about mechanical issues with e-scooters, so changing the design, moving the battery to maybe the stem or somewhere else, making sure that there's a minimum IP rating for these products so we don't get issues with water ingress, and investing in the future safer battery technologies that is happening in parallel. Okay.
Yeah, it's just Effie. I think it's over to me now.
Yeah.
So we see the issue, obviously, in my team in public affairs. Obviously, we can only regulate for what can be regulated, right? So that's one half of the problem, which is what Giuseppe's spoken about as well. The issues in industry, the issues in the third-party certification sort of side of things. But the other half of it is consumer behavior, and it's the same in any sort of safety thing. You can regulate up to a point, but you have to get through to people, and you have to make people understand the dangers and the behavioral things that come in and also cause fires. I was speaking tonight before the call. It's the same thing as chip pan fires. You have to get through to people that eventually it does start to get through, but there's a risk there. People start to change their behavior. So you'll probably recognise Giuseppe on this slide here. But one of the things we do is obviously use the media to try and, we did it with Scott last week, and unfortunately that was quite a sad story, but sometimes there's opportunities to go on the news and talk constructively, in better circumstances. So obviously that's one part of our charity's mission, and what we'd like to engage with you guys hopefully on this call with, to try and start getting the messaging out there to people that might live in the social housing, or to anybody really. It's an issue that affects people across the housing tenures. But yeah, just a little example here about what we've done. There's CEO Giuseppe again, and dominating the news headlines. And again, we do a lot of work on social media to try and target, I guess, statistically younger people, try and get in there with social media messaging that may or may not have e-bikes, and that kind of stuff. And then sort of my sort of area, which is the political solutions. So obviously Giuseppe spoke about the number of recommendations that were in the report. And then last year we brought forward a bill, which I know Nigel and his team were very grateful for their supported the bill. Unfortunately, the general election scuppered it slightly. The bill was due to be heard on the 5th of June, and Parliament was prorogued on the 1st, I think. So we missed out by 3 or 4 days, but sort of not letting that stop us. Obviously, we had to pause because the general election. So we're using this time to sort of build a campaign and try and get through to the next government, whoever they may be, and try and build up support and make this an issue that people can't ignore, regardless of who gets in. And then, yeah, this just touches on, this was our bill, but this is, I guess we've called it now our proposed solution. So clause 1 is sort of what Giuseppe spoke about before, the third party assessment. So in order for a battery to be declared safe, it'll have to go to a test house or a conformity assessment board, and they will check the battery against the standards, as opposed to the current situation where the manufacturer will self-declare. And this is pretty similar to legislation that covers fireworks and heavy machinery, because these are sort of high-risk products. They fall outside of their own areas of legislation, and they have to have these third-party certification. And then this also helps in enforcement. With a dedicated standard, it gives trading standards, local authorities, the Office of Product Safety and Standards, sort of legislation and regulations to be able to act against products with. The second clause came about through conversations with LSB and the National Fire Chiefs Council around the disposal of these batteries as well. Because obviously there's a big issue with things like disposable vapes. These are tiny little batteries, but they can still go into refuge collection, sort of bin lorries, all that kind of stuff, get crushed or get compacted. start a fire. There was an incident near me in Chester the other week. A recycling lorry, all the rubbish was out on the road, smouldering, and that was caused by a little disposable vape. So you can imagine what would happen if one of the batteries that we saw previously go up an e-bike battery entered the wrong thing, got crushed. It could be pretty catastrophic. So although we're a domestic charity, you can argue that the fires start in the home or when the battery has been disposed of incorrectly. So there's a role to play there, again, in being able to educate consumers or people that live in social housing and across housing tenures about how to dispose of these properly. So this clause would basically put in place, probably fit under the WE directive, probably just clarify it under there about how to dispose of and make it disposal safer. And it would also introduce markings on the battery around the chemical components within it. This is after conversations with colleagues in the healthcare sort of side of things, almost like a wash book, because obviously there's about 13 different gases that come off one of these batteries when they go up. The worst one, I think, is hydrogen fluoride, which is what gets many people. It's a really nasty gas, and it sort of strips the lining of your lungs, does irreparable damage to the body. So being able to see on a piece of paper what somebody might have been exposed to, obviously in a healthcare setting, would be quite important to them. And then the third solution would be conversion kits, making sure that there's a dedicated standard in place for these conversion kits to stop people just having a go. Basically, it's quite a dangerous thing to just do without proper standards in place. And we'd like to see a standard put in place there, because they're not, as Giuseppe says, these things aren't inherently dangerous. It's when they're unregulated, things start to go wrong. And then again, with a standard in place for charges, like Giuseppe said, to either proprietary or non-proprietary, which would then lead to a temporary ban on universal charges whilst that regulation and legislation came through. So yeah, our next steps now obviously have changed a little bit because of the general election, but it's doing things like this and meeting people, trying to talk to people to increase support for the campaign and our legislation, which we will be bringing back at some point with the next government. But we're going to use this time that we've got and try and cut through the general election. And we did last week with Scott and the media blast, but to make it a high profile issue. And it is, there's already too many people have died, and it's only going to continue to cause fatalities, unfortunately, until something changes. So we'll be exploring legislative, so seeing if there's any bills that come through with the new government that we can make amendments to, work sort of across the parties to try and get consensus and get these sort of things introduced that way. Or there's always backbench bills, which is what we did last time, to try and introduce sort of legislation and build consensus that way. And then again, things like this, increasing awareness about the risks to UK consumers and people across the UK, and just how dangerous these things are to have and charge in your home if they're not regulated properly. I think that does. So I've seen quite a few questions come through the chat as well whilst we've been presenting. So I know there is some questions, so I probably should remove the question mark. But yeah, thanks for your time, and I look forward to answering questions now.
Yeah, I'll jump in just because I've just been looking at the chat. So there was one. One statement at the beginning was that Mike Fricker was pointing out that traditional fire extinguishers don't work, but LIFX extinguishers work very well according to the standards that they've been given. I don't know if you guys know a lot about LIFX. I was talking about it just yesterday with some of my colleagues.
I have heard that there are some people are bringing out some extinguishers that can extinguish these fires, and I think it's an endothermic reaction. So it basically works by cooling the cells and trying to extinguish them that way, rather than trying to remove the oxygen, which is the way conventional extinguishers work. Yeah. So that's all great, but it would be much better if we didn't need those extinguishers at all, because there were no fires. So we look at this from all angles, and it's much better to tackle this at the design stage and make sure that only safe products get on the market. Then we only need the fire extinguishers in the worst of cases, which is where things go wrong.
Brilliant, thank you. Also, so will PAT testing show that which charges are unsuitable? And so can they currently check in the workplace
they can do for the chargers. Pat testing would work, because one of the issues is the chargers. We've actually seen this. There's a new campaign coming out very shortly to do with mobile phone chargers. There's a barrier between the mains and the output, and usually you find, what we've found in many of the cases of these substandard chargers, is it's that barrier that's compromised. So when you do a pat test, if you're, depending on the type of pat tester, you usually need a flash test rather than an installation tester, but some testers can test that barrier between the mains input and the low voltage output that's supposed to be safe to touch.
Brilliant. Thank you. So another one here. So can these batteries be fitted with power diverters once fully charged, like laptops and mobile phones?
They are. So a battery management system will shut the power off to the battery once it reaches about 80% of charge. And it's actually been found that if you keep your, so the battery management system will shut off the charge, will shut off the output to the battery once it reaches about 3 volts per cell, and it will shut off the power to the battery once it reaches about 80% full charge. And that does two things: it protects the cell and it actually increases the life. And what you find is all these YouTube videos that we were seeing out there where they're saying, oh, get your battery to go much further, you can get much further on the e-bike if you make this modification. What they're actually doing is they're circumventing the bit that stops the battery from over discharging. So they're allowing the battery cell to go down past 3 volts to sort of 2 volts and 1 volt. And that's the thing that actually can cause thermal runaway, but it also really reduces the life of the battery. So it causes also problems for the environment, because these batteries just don't last anywhere near as long. So they're going to end up in the waste stream much earlier than they would if they followed the proper legislation, the proper test.
Brilliant. Which led us on to the other question, which I think we've really covered, about safe disposal of batteries, how it can be done. I think it's a big grey area, isn't it, for people?
Yeah, it is, but it's in our bill. And actually, the good news is change is coming. Even if our bill doesn't get taken on, there's a new European battery regulation that's started coming out in February, and it's going to be rolled out over the next few years. And hopefully, if our recommendations don't get taken on, maybe the UK will mirror the EU regulations, which do mirror quite a few. It doesn't quite go as far as our bill, but it is a step in the right direction, and it does cover a lot of the issues, including mandatory certification to a certain extent for batteries for e-bikes and e-scooters. So it has been recognised, and the good news is change is coming.
Yeah, and one of the questions, that's really good, thank you. I don't know if you know already whether companies like Uber Eats and Deliveroo are tackling this issue as well, because obviously there are a load of self-employed people using these under their names. So what's going on there?
So we do know that London Fire Brigade have been in contact with many of these companies, and we do know that it's a big problem, not just in the UK, but that's the thing that actually triggered the legislation in New York. It was the enormous number of delivery systems and drivers that were like modifying bikes. When I walk from here to the station at Waterloo, there's an area where some of these guys sort of congregate, and we've taken pictures of the DIY modifications to these bikes where they've added 2, 3, 4 battery packs to them, and it isn't ideal, but we do know some of those companies are looking at it. I can't remember which one of those companies it is, but one of them has started supplying bikes. I think they use the Zumo bike.
Yeah, it's Just Eat. So Just Eat have introduced a fleet of they are basically hire bikes, but riders can, instead of having a bike, buying themselves a bike, they can use these hire ones through their shift and then drop them in. LFB have been engaging with Deliveroo and doing a lot of outreach with Deliveroo across London to try and tackle the issue. But the big sort of stopping point between the two things is people that ride these companies are technically self-employed. That's, they're on 0-hour contracts, it's shift work. So there's no obligation on just the Deliveroo, Uber Eats to ensure these things. So unfortunately, that's the sort of big thing we can't get past, and they won't get past. So again, it's about cutting that out from underneath and making it illegal to have these e-bikes that don't meet standard, or making the purchasing of substandard batteries, illegal, and trying to get the education point across that it's not a good idea to strap 4 batteries to an e-bike and charge them all next to each other overnight. It's basically disaster waiting to happen. So there is work to be done there, but hopefully things like our Bill campaign and through engagement with the riders themselves can try and get to a point where people understand the risk. But a lot of the times, unfortunately, is we've done some surveys and some outreach with them, and they know the risk, but it's a choice they're making. They're foregoing they're acknowledging the risk, but they think we need these batteries to go further, to make more money, and it's sort of a decision they're making. So yeah, it's work to be done there.
So I've just got 2 more. So in police circles involving seizure and court production, storage and lost found property holding large numbers of items and batteries, do you recommend cabinet storage for bulk storing these batteries?
We did explore charging bags and storage solutions for batteries. The problem is, at the moment, there's no standard for them. So although there are some companies that do produce like charging bags and storage solutions, until there's a standard for them that has looked at the actual design to make sure they are actually what they say they are on the tin, because it's not just a case of, if a battery goes into firm or runaway, you've got all the gases to deal with. So trying to contain that is going to be a challenge. So
it's a problem we've found on airlines as well. Airlines are struggling with it too, because obviously there's a large amount of lithium-ion batteries that are being shipped across the world. They're looking for solutions. I think there was a flight that crashed in Dubai, I think, that was caused by lithium-ion battery going up. So it's a problem how you can transport these safely. So
the other issue with charging solutions like these charge bags is usually a cost thing, in that, like, the box that you would charge the battery in might be like many times the cost of the battery itself. So that's also a challenge. So I think there's work to do in that area, but as I said earlier, it's much better that we sort of tackle this at the design stage.
Sure. Sorry, Helen, I missed it before, but do you guys have any information that can be displayed in scooter stores?
Yeah.
Is there something you can provide to our attendees? That'd be really helpful, I think, for some 100%. People.
We've got some information posters. We'll send around a Frontify link after this. I'll send it to you guys, and then feel free to distribute to the list.
Thank you. So I think the last question I've gotten here so far is many comparisons can be made here between e-bikes and electric vehicles / EV chargers. Intriguing, there's regulatory progress on one and not the other. A lot of regulations could be mirrored here, or could be used as a starting point, such as an approved product list, minimal IK rating, charging standards, testing requirements, etc. More could be done with EVCP2, though, but that's another argument or a statement question. Well, I think that's it so far in the chat.
Yeah, there are standards out there for, like, the e-bikes and e-scooters, and although we'd like to see them becoming more robust, and I'm sure that'll happen over time, they are there. But at the moment, the issues with it, like, we don't see our cars, our laptops and our phones just bursting into flames. And that's the reason. The reason for that is usually you've got reputable manufacturers making these products and making them to a product standard that's been put together by a committee of experts. and it's reducing the risk to what they call a tolerable level. And that exists also for e-bikes, e-scooters. These products aren't inherently unsafe. All the safety features are out there. It's just what we're getting manufacturers that are just not, that they're not taking any notice of the work that's been done, and they're just putting these high risk products on the market without the safety features.
That's really helpful. I'm really grateful, Giuseppe and Henry, for you sharing that information with us. Well, there's a few other questions coming in. I've got a couple. One is the guidance that you've shared with us. A lot of it is for the users themselves. Would you have any additional sort of advice for the likes of social landlords, the owners and managers of residential buildings, as this is the majority of our audience today? The risks should be reduced with the introduction of new laws and guidance and so forth. We will still have a lot of older products on the market, even once we get to that point. Would you also agree that even a product of a high quality, there's still a risk of it going into thermal runaway if it's misused? So in a sense, it's never going to go away completely.
Sure.
It's still going to be here. Would you offer any sort of further advice for landlords in how they should be approaching that, please? Appreciate your thoughts on that.
I think the advice that we give with regard to charging, like charging outside the property if you've got the potential to do that, making sure if you don't, that you don't charge in an escape route, charging it, unplugging it once it's finished charging, making sure you've got working smoke alarms. These are all things that you can do whether you've got a high quality product or not. And the fact that there's less chance of your product going to thermal runaway, as you said, it still can happen. Things can go wrong. BMSs can even if they're tested properly, and they're usually tested for single fault conditions, you can still get situations. We do still see, although it doesn't happen that often, products that are properly tested causing fire. So it does still make sense to take these sensible steps in order to make sure that you could, because if you imagine a lithium ion battery, it holds the same amount of energy as the TNT in 6 hand grenades. So even if it's a safe product and it's been designed properly, it still needs safe and careful handling. And it's the same thing as if you had a 5 litre canister of petrol. You're not going to leave that in an area where it's near to something that could ignite it, or where it's near to combustible materials. And we still have to take that sensible approach to batteries. It's just in the past, batteries have been seen as a low risk item because we're used to seeing sort of small batteries. When they become as big as they are in e-bikes and e-scooters, it's a different situation, and we have to have respect for the amount of energy that is stored in these batteries.
Yeah, I think as well, sorry, just to put in there, it ties in a little bit to a question I've just seen Scott put in the chat about insurance companies on board with providing guidance. It is an issue that we're working with the insurance sector. We've got AXA on board, Zurich. There's a lot of people that are in a similar sort of situation, I imagine, as sort of you guys. They need to know what the risk profile is of the properties that they're insuring, and I'm sure you guys, it'd be helpful to know the actual risk profile of your properties. And things like having these lithium-ion batteries in it greatly increase the risk. It's a big issue in the insurance sector because there's at the moment an unclear understanding of where the responsibility lies. Is it who pays out? Where's the payment coming from? So they do. We are working with the insurance sector to answer Scott's question, to try and get them to put policies in on their side, but they're also very supportive of the idea of regulation coming down the line, because then it gives an answer to, it gives some regulation as opposed to none.
Yeah, it's very helpful, Henry. Thank you. Yeah, I think we've probably got 1 or 2 representatives from the insurance industry on the call today, and we'd be grateful for any contributions or advice, and certainly something that we'll be looking to to engage with them on future future webinars. No, you put that really clearly. Thank you there. That's excellent. Well, certainly from our point of view, we're very keen to help assist landlords with providing that sort of information. So certainly we'll be sort of sharing the information the Electrical Safety First have produced. I think some excellent material there, some really very clear, graphics, very clear messaging, which I think can only help. Because if we can get this message out to residents and all residents, not just I think this is important, not just the users of the devices, but all residents, if they're aware of the risk, then we can be having an open, collaborative approach, conversation to the risk, saying, right, guys, what are we going to do about this? And they actually get involved and co-design those solutions. And I think that's really powerful, so that it's not something which is just imposed upon them, even though that can be justified. But they're involved in the development of those solutions, whether it's finding safe charging points, maybe moving devices that are particularly high risk. And I think the outcome will get much more engagement, much more adherence to those guidelines if we do that. Were there any other comments, Ed, on the chat?
The one thing not touched on is just whether or not there's any inclusion for safe rooms and charging areas for e-bikes and e-scooters in new builds for social housing, whether that's been talked about much.
I did join a panel a couple of months ago, and they were talking about like the safe design of buildings and high rise and how to deal with the the fire load from this. But it's not an area that I'm an expert at, but I do know that there's other people working on that side of it, and I believe Phil Clark from the fire chiefs was involved, and he's also going to be talking about that at our conference later in the year. So I think there is work going on in that area, but it's not something I have any expertise in or knowledge, but I know people are talking about it.
Brilliant, thank you.
That's a really important point, actually, for new buildings. There's guidance around underground car parking and what we need to be doing about electric cars, and quite specifically it says this is not designed to cover small light electric vehicles or e-bikes and things, so there definitely needs to be some specific guidance developed for that. That's very important.
I think it was the FPA were doing work in that area, which is the Fire Prevention Association.
Yeah, and one thing that has been identified is that there's clearly a recommendation to have external storage where you can, but where you're looking at an internal space, then it needs to have full compartmentation. It needs to have fire detection, needs to have fume extraction, needs to have fire suppression. But the London Fire Brigade guidance note GN 103, I think, is also identifying the need for potentially additional structural fire separation. So like you were saying, some of the common materials that we might have used up till now can be penetrated very quickly with the thermal runaway event. So I don't know if anybody actually even has the answers to this yet, but I think it's recognising that it is a problem, it is a risk, and we can't necessarily just move forward applying the current processes to that.
Yeah,
would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think it was brought up that, like, when you look at things like fire doors, they're designed for a standard sort of like fire curve, and the fire from a lithium ion battery is much more severe. It's more like I think they called it as I say, I'm not an expert on this, but I think the curve was more like the curve from a jet fire.
Yeah, thank you, Giuseppe. Well, we've got 2 minutes. Anybody want to stick their hand up and ask the panel some questions?
I can read some out if no one wants to actually talk. Always happy.
Never normally this shy.
No, this is very strange. Where do mobility scooters and electric wheelchairs sit on the risk profile, as there are some issues around design and DDA in the sector?
Oh, that's a good one. Very, very good question.
Yeah, I'll have a hash at it, and then I'll let Giuseppe come in and tell me where I'm wrong. So in theory, there's the same level of risk. There's lithium-ion battery. There's always a risk of thermal runaway, as we touched on in the throughout the webinar. I believe there's a recent British standard in place for mobility wheelchairs that covers lithium-ion batteries. I think quite a recent one. But again, I think it's the same issue. Whenever you're charging lithium-ion battery, I would assume, am I right, Giuseppe, that they are similar sort of issues around certification of batteries and manufacturing in
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Worcester?
absolutely. So traditionally, these type of products used to use lead acid batteries, but like newer ones do use lithium ion batteries. So you end up with the same issue. I think they're having a bigger problem with this in Australia because of the much higher ambient temperatures, and there's been issues with like I think even golf carts and mobility scooters catching fire just from being out in the in direct sunlight. So yeah, same risks and same precautions need to be taken.
No, that's really helpful. Would you agree, Giuseppe, that the risk is very similar? The way we approach that may have to be slightly different, and a detailed sort of individual risk assessment approach, where you've got users with limited mobility, something we can come back to in another session, I guess. But I think that's a really, really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that is an important point because, there might be a bigger case for those type of products to be, stored outside the building because you can't, due to mobility issues and the like.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Well, I think that brings us to our time, and I'm hugely grateful to Giuseppe and Henry for putting this presentation on for us, as I'm sure all the delegates are. We really appreciate that. Thank you, and very much appreciate your offer to share information following this, and that's certainly something which we'll be actively seeking to disseminate. Thank you very much, everybody that's attended and contributed. Hope you take lots of valuable information away from this, and look forward to building on that in future events. We will, within a few days or a week perhaps, we will have a video and a summary on our website, and we'll send you all a link to that. So thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
For your time, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.